Welcome to the Deep Dive, Congress in Context. If you're looking for a clear, concise shortcut to understanding the biggest legislative battles in Washington right now, well, you are definitely in the right place. Our mission today is to take a stack of, let's be honest, pretty dense source material floor debates, reports, legislative drafts, and really pull out the critical knowledge you need.
Yeah, and we're looking at a period that seems really defined by a battle for control. Who controls local governance, who controls the nation's finances, and who gets to control the narrative. We're tracking some critical budget deadlines, these high-stakes ideological clashes over health care, and some really fascinating policy fights over D.C. autonomy, and even the breakdown of the family structure.
Okay, so let's unpack this overarching theme of control, starting right at the heart of federal power, the District of Columbia, #tag legislative highlights and key votes, the D.C. battleground.
Right, because Congress has this unique constitutional authority over D.C., pretty much any local action can become a national political football. We saw two major examples of this just recently, both focused on basically overturning local decisions made in D.C.
Okay, first up is H.R. 5125. That's the D.C. Judicial Nominations Reform Act. This one just passed the House, and it was almost perfectly down party lines. 218 yeas to 211 nays. Its goal, to get rid of the district's Judicial Nomination Commission, the JNC.
So on the surface, proponents are arguing that the current commission system, well, it's failing. They say it's causing a crisis with 15 open judicial seats. But you do have to ask, why is Congress stepping into a local commission, one that's been merit-based, apparently functioning for 50 years?
That's the strategic point, isn't it? Opponents immediately jumped on that. They argued the JNC isn't the actual problem. They're pointing fingers squarely at the White House for, slow nominations and the Senate for slow confirmations. So they see this move, which kind of bypasses the will of 700,000 D.C. residents, not as judicial reform, but as more of a political power grab.
Yeah.
It really sets a powerful precedent, potentially, for federal intrusion into local matters.
Yeah. And we saw that exact same tension play out with the other bill, the D.C. Policing Protection Act, H.R. 5143. Now, the vote on that one was actually postponed, but it still generated some pretty furious debate. This bill wants to restore officer discretion by reversing D.C.'s 2022 restrictions on police pursuits.
This sounds like a classic policy dilemma. Public safety versus public risk. So proponents of H.R. 5143, they argue the 2022 D.C. law is just too restrictive. They mention something like 14 complex factors, and they claim it's essentially made it, quote, illegal for police to pursue a vehicle, basically giving criminals a free pass.
But on the flip side, opponents are highlighting the, frankly, shocking danger. Especially in a dense urban place like D.C. They cited some pretty stark data. Between 2017 and 2022, over 3,000 people died in police car chases across the country. And here's the detail that really sticks with you. Half of those killed were innocent bystanders.
Wow, half were innocent bystanders. That statistic alone really underscores the complexity here. I mean, these are tough policy choices, and it shows that tension between federal oversight and, local safety concerns.
It really does.
Interestingly, though, amidst all this conflict, we did see one notable point of agreement, the bipartisan push for the Counseling for Career Choice Act.
That's right, aiming to expand K-12 career counseling, focus on apprenticeships, financial literacy. A little pause in the partisan fighting anyway.
Yeah.
#tag political dynamics, the budget, and healthcare cliff.
Yeah.
Speaking of partisan fighting, let's pivot from local control in D.C. to national financial control. The House did pass a clean, short-term continuing resolution, a CR, to keep the government funded until November 21st.
Okay, but a CR just kicks the can down the road, right? It doesn't solve the real problem, which is that Congress still hasn't passed the 12 individual appropriations bills needed for a full budget. So what's the fundamental sticking point? Why this short-term fix?
Well, the leverage point, a really high-stakes conflict, it's centered squarely on healthcare funding. Democrats are insisting that essential healthcare funding, specifically the Affordable Care Act, or ACA, premium tax credits, must be restored. Republicans, on the other hand, are pushing for a clean extension, one that avoids those provisions for now, setting up a bigger negotiation later.
And if that funding expires, this moves beyond just bureaucratic arguments. It becomes what a lot of people are calling a five-alarm fire for American families. You mentioned, 22 to 24 million Americans rely on those ACA subsidies.
Exactly. And the potential financial impact is, staggering. If those tax credits expire, premiums could just skyrocket, maybe up to 75%.
Right.
And to put a human face on that, our sources indicate a family of four, say earning $90,000 a year, they could see their premiums jump by 69%. That's over $3,000 per year.
69%.
Yeah. And consider a high-cost state example, like Wyoming. A 60-year-old couple there. They could face an increase of over $37,000 a year.
Wait, hang on. Over $37,000? That could be, what, over a third of their income wiped out by an expired tax credit? If the stakes are that high, what political leverage could possibly be worth risking that kind of hike?
And that is the absolute core of the disagreement. Democrats are framing the proposed cuts and expirations as a cruel blow. They're tying it to what they've branded the big betrayal bill, arguing it's all designed to finance tax breaks for the wealthy. Republicans defend their broader spending proposal, sometimes called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, by arguing that high costs actually stem from Obamacare itself. And they claim their overall plan increases take-home pay for typical families by, thousands of dollars. Around $10,900 is a figure mentioned. So the disagreement isn't really about the numbers themselves. It's about the fundamental philosophy of who the government should subsidize and ultimately who should pay. Hashtag tag political dynamics, economic policy, and rhetoric. And this kind of financial tension, it definitely extends into trade policy, too. We're seeing deep conflict over tariffs.
Right. Tariff critics seem relentless. They're calling them reckless, saying they raise prices on everything, groceries, cars. They point to really serious consequences, like farm bankruptcy spiking 95% and canceled manufacturing projects. I saw a figure of $107 million in lost investment in Ohio alone, affecting big names like Libby Glass and Kraft Heinz.
But the tariff proponents, well, they see these policies as absolutely necessary. A move to protect American workers, ensure fair trade globally. They point to the fact that tariffs are generating significant federal revenue. We're talking over $29 billion in customs and excise taxes collected. And they argue that they're successfully bringing countries like India, China, South Korea to the negotiating table. They see it as a decisive step towards, more balanced trade.
This intense economic and financial uncertainty, it often spills over into really fraught political discourse, doesn't it? The mood in Congress seemed particularly solemn during discussions surrounding the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It really forced members to address immediate concerns about their own security in this kind of climate.
Yeah, add that event and the discussions that followed around Constitution Day, they really highlighted this acute tension between political security and free speech principles. We heard members reaffirming that foundational idea that words are not violence. Violence is violence.
But what's fascinating, or maybe troubling, is how quickly the political conflict sort of seized upon that moment. We saw that failed attempt to censure Representative Omar for social media posts made right after the assassination. And critics of that censure resolution immediately argue that the resolution itself was an attack on free speech. It just shows how quickly tragic events get pulled into these existing partisan battles over where the First Amendment begins and ends. Hashtag context and analysis, science, safety, and families.
Stepping back a bit, we also see these ideological lines being drawn in maybe less expected areas, like science and social structure.
Yeah.
There was one really powerful line of argument focusing on what was termed the attack on science.
Yeah, Representative Johnson from Texas offered a particularly sharp historical critique there. She linked the suppression of scientific expertise and elevating loyalty over actual knowledge to historical authoritarian regimes. She explicitly mentioned Nazi Germany, Stalin's Soviet Union, Mao's Cultural Revolution. Pretty strong stuff.
And if you connect that sort of high-level rhetoric to tangible policy, you can see why the debate is so charged. The fight involves the HHS secretary canceling nearly, $500 million in vaccine development contracts and openly attacking medical institutions. Supporters of science, they stress the huge public health successes we've had from vaccines, polio, tetanus, things like that. They see these attacks as reckless, potentially creating deep public distrust. And concerns were immediately raised about proposed cuts to critical research, too, including terminating pediatric cancer research funding at places like Fred Hutch.
We also heard a really unique argument introduced by Representative Grothman. He focused on the breakdown of the traditional family structure. He described it as the most pressing problem contributing to, well, a whole list: rising crime, drug use, education deficits.
And his argument is very policy-based. He's arguing that the government itself, through its benefit programs, is actively incentivizing single-parent households by penalizing married couples. He cites some really striking potential penalties, estimating that low-income married couples could lose $25,000 to $35,000 a year in combined benefits, things like housing assistance, the Earned Income Tax Credit, child care support, Pell Grants.
$25,000 to $35,000, that's a huge potential penalty. But is the argument that these policies are truly the cause of the breakdown? Or maybe just compounding broader shifts? The statistic he cited was pretty dramatic. Back in the 1960s, 5% of children were born without both parents at home. Today, he says, it's 40%.
That's the absolute crux of his argument and the debate around it. He argues that by making it financially painful, essentially, for low-income parents to marry, the government is deliberately undermining that family structure. And he connects those financial incentives directly to that massive statistical shift over the decades. It really highlights a deeply philosophical divide over the role of welfare and marriage in America today. Hashtag future implications and citizen engagement.
Okay, so that is a lot to take in. What does this torrent of complex information mean for you looking ahead?
Well, you definitely need to keep your eyes on two immediate deadlines, that crucial November 21st CR deadline for government funding and the impending expiration of those ACA healthcare tax credits we talked about. Yeah, the consequences of inaction on either of those fronts, a potential budget shutdown or that, potentially catastrophic 69% premium hike for millions, they're very real and very immediate. So given how intense these battles are, citizen engagement really is vital. You can track all the bills we discussed today, H.R. 5125 on the D.C. courts, H.R. 5143 on D.C. policing, directly on congress.gov, see the details, see where your own representative stands.
And probably most urgently, contacting your representatives about the budget and healthcare standoff is critical right now. When the states involved potentially losing access to affordable healthcare or seeing huge premium jumps, your input really does carry significant weight.
This all raises a really important question that kind of synthesizes a lot of what we explored today from the sources. As Congress is debating transferring local autonomy away from D.C. residents, centralizing power at the federal level with that judicial bill, while at the same time, everyone's acknowledging the astronomical national debt, currently sitting at $37 trillion. Where should the American people draw the line between what's necessary, federal oversight, and what's protecting local autonomy and fiscal responsibility?
That's a great question. Connecting the local court system in D.C. directly to the national balance sheet and broader questions of power. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the complex workings of Congress. We really hope this is giving you a clear, strategic understanding of the battles being fought right now in Washington.
Until next time, keep exploring the complexity.